Hello, my name is Jordan Woynilko, and welcome to my very first YouTube video ever. Today, I'll be talking to you about power and leadership, the sources of power, and various influence and power consequences. Thanks, let's get started. I'll be listing all the references that I use throughout this video at the end of the video, so for now, let's get started again. From the course textbook, in Table 5.1 on page 147, French and Raven's sources of individual power. Legitimate power. Based on a person holding a formal position, others comply because they accept the legitimacy of the position of the power holder. Second source of power, reward power. Based on a person's access to rewards. Others comply because they want the rewards the power holder can offer. They want the rewards the power holder can offer them. Third source of power, coercive power. Coercive power is based on a person's ability to punish. Others comply because they fear punishment. Source of power number 4 is expert power. Based on a person's expertise, competence, and information in a certain area. Others comply because they believe in the power holder's knowledge and competence. This usually is in a skilled trade, such as a doctor, a lawyer, someone people trust because they're an expert in their area of expertise. The fifth source of power, according to French and Raven's individual sources of power, is referent power. This is based on a person's attractiveness to and friendships with others. This means others comply because they simply respect the power holder. Likability is a factor. If the followers like the person with the referent power, it's called referent power. The next thing I'm going to talk to you about is I'm going to define power generally and how it compares to leadership. Also, I will summarize the relationship between influence and power. Power and leadership are inseparable. Power is necessary and essential to effective leadership. The abuse of power is generally low in the United States. Leadership roles and people in leadership roles, they abuse their power sometimes, and many of the followers know that, and it's known, and they are removed from their leadership roles because of their abuse of power. Here's an example of power and leadership in action. Reese's, come here. Come here. So the relationship of influence and power, the relationship between influence and power, was just demonstrated through me calling my dog's name. I influenced her to come to me. That's reward power because she thinks I have food. So when I call her name, she thinks I'm going to pet her or I have food. She's getting a reward. I use my power and leadership and influence through the reward power in that example. Although the dog example is the most simplest example of reward power, it's much more dynamic when you're talking about leaders and staff and how that influences power and the followers of the staff. Those who have power tend to be more action-oriented. Galinsky, Grunfeld, and McGee, 2003. This diagram in the course text, The Art and Science of Leadership by Afsana Nahavandi, the 7th edition, figure 5-1 on page 144, shows the negative and positive teeter-totter effects of power. You can have positive power that you influence followers with, or negative power, which causes abuse and consequences. The relationship between leaders and staff and the effect the influence has on power and power on influence towards followers and leaders alike is a revolving circle, best depicted by this diagram that's on page 144 of the course text. It shows, it's self-explanatory, the leader characteristics, the follower compliance, abuse of power, what it leads to, the follower flattery, the effect it has on the organization as a whole. In conclusion, using different sources of power, of individual power, has different impacts on followers and the person leading. A direct quote that summarizes this is, when a legitimate authority source asks them to, people comply with requests and implement decisions. Woynilko and Falb, 1991. As far as reward power, we comply to receive an award or avoid punishment in the case of coercive power, which can have negative effects as demonstrated earlier. My personal conclusions is that leaders need to use every source of power, use their position as a source of power as well. Depending on the followers, the scenario, each source of power has its positives and negatives.